We're out here in the garden on a warm, sunny, late fall day, and this morning we're putting together orders for shipping, and specifically I need to dig up some of our Myoga ginger, which is a perennial, it turns out to be super hardy perennial ginger. And what I thought I would do in this video is a few things. One, show you the context in which we're growing this plant. Two, show you how we dig up and transplant. And most importantly, if you've ordered Myoga ginger from us or from another vendor or another person, or you're getting some transplants from someone, how to work with the roots and get them set back in the ground. They're a little funky to read, and so I want to make sure you understand them thoroughly. So stick with us. Just as a little backstory, when we first got Myoga ginger, it was in the spring of 2017. We ordered, it was a very small pot, it was very expensive, and I thought it was only supposed to be hardy to zone 7. So we thought we'd put it in this high tunnel, and that's where we started growing this plant. You can see this is still the patch. Because we haven't had a frost in here yet, you get a sense of how big they can get. It's a beautiful plant. We've since learned that you don't need, somehow, I'm not saying this definitively, but for 2 winters in a row, we've had transplants out in our garden, Zone 5B, Central New York, north-facing slope, wet site, and they've overwintered just fine. So the high tunnel in a Zone 5B context doesn't seem critical, but you can see the part that you actually eat and enjoy with Myoga is down here. These are a little past prime, but these beautiful, strange little flowers. You know, that one's a little closer to the right size, but they're a little older now. It's more of an August, September harvest. Beautiful flowers, you can pickle them. Sasha made a beautiful umeboshi plum pickle of them, which we'll show you.
I pickled them in the umeboshi last summer. It's pretty salty, but really good. You just sparingly, a tiny bit on food is pretty special flavor. They're really pretty.
And so then the question is, well, how do we expand these plantings? They're vigorous, they're lovely, but if you're just getting them for the first time from us or from somewhere else, how do you get them established? How do you take an existing patch that you might have and make divisions? So let's get into that outside in the garden. So we're back out here in the garden where we started, and what I'd like to do is dig up from this patch here. Now, this looks very distinctly different than the one in the high tunnel. This isn't a patch that has died or failed. It's simply what happens, what Myoga looks like once it's gotten a good deep frost into it. You can see all the stems die back. It makes its own perfect mulch. And here they're growing under the canopy of a bunch of sea buckthorn for some random reason. I have no idea why we chose to do that, but it's beautiful and it works. And so I want to get in here and actually dig some of these roots up, show you what the roots look like, and help try to unravel what could be a little confusing if you've gotten some plant material from us or another vendor. Now in this case I'm using a nursery spade. This is something called the King of Spades, which I highly recommend, but it's expensive, and if you're only doing this on a small scale, definitely just use a $12, $15 shovel or one you find at a yard sale. That'll work just fine. But I'm getting under this patch. It's a shallow spreading plant, and the roots will break here and there, but it's very powerful, and that more than anything just will promote more divisions. You can get a sense of what the root system looks like. Now, just like with any bare root or any fall or early spring transplant, once this material is out of the ground, it needs to be dunked in water immediately so that it doesn't go through stress. So let's do that. So here's a little mat of these roots, and once I dip them in the water, I can start to get a sense of what's actually happening. And I might put forward the idea that this is a good universal rule, is always have water right near where you're digging up plants for transplant. Gets them hydrated and also reveals and shows you what's happening. Now, let's say you ordered some plant material from us. What we will send you may very well look like something like this. And what we're looking at here, once you understand it, it makes perfect sense. These flat plates here, these are where last year's green growth was. So basically this way up. You can see these little shoots coming off from the side. That is the future of where this plant wants to expand. So here's a little tiny root. You can see these are the storage organs that it holds energy for the future. That's where it was growing. That's where it will be growing. So if I were to plant this in the soil, let's say that's the soil line, I'd want to get it something like that. We'll show you that in a moment. More examples. Here's a little bit more robust. Last year's growth, the future, where it will send up new shoots along this whole line. Like I said, Myoga is really good at spreading and filling out a place. It becomes weedy in a wonderful way in full sun and partial shade for us. And here's a whole crazy mat of roots. So we'll process these, cut them down. If we're sending Myoga to you, we send you a number of them, so you've got a few chances to get it right. And we'd love to hear from you how they grow, what sort of context you try them in. Zone 5B or warmer, this should be rock solid, reliably hardy outside with no protection. Let's get some of these planted out in the garden. Before we walk away to another area, it's easy to forget once you've gotten plants dug out that you're excited to move to a new spot where you dug them from. But it's so important to make sure you cover your tracks. You want to get the soil back on the roots, get some mulch over them. Myoga, like I mentioned before, so generous. Whoop, there's one. Thanks, Sash. And it makes its own mulch so we can use the stems from last year's growth to cover where I dug. Here we are with some plant material, some bare root Myoga, and I'm going to plant it for demonstration right in this spot. We'll lift it and send it along, but just to show you. And you can actually see here, here's an opportunity. I can trim it, because as long as I've got that plate facing up, I've got some shoots for next year and some good roots. That's a viable propagule. And again, you know, here's a section, there's a section. I can cut that. And I've got my plate, my roots, my shoots. And what I'd like to do is simply open up the soil. I'm always hard pressed to dig in our garden because the weeds, quote unquote, are often things we'd want. So there's some salad and lettuce greens and another sea berry scene and some tarragon. But here I'm going to go in knowing Myoga is a nice shallow rooted powerful plant, and I'm going to settle it in, spreading the roots out with that plate facing up. I'm not going to go crazy about it. I'm just going to try to get it back roughly how it was in the earth. The plate, the shoots, the roots, we'll lay it out shallow, get some soil on top. You can see it's still exposed, so I want to get that covered a little more. One more. One more here. We will open the soil, settle it in, facing up, get the soil back around, get some good packing around it there. Last but not least, when in doubt, spread it out. Just have the roots go nice and wide. Even if you plant plants like this, the ones that are hard to read their root systems, if you plant them upside down or 90-degree turn, more often than not, they're going to figure themselves out and still grow. It's just nice if you can understand their pattern at the outset. We mulch our pathways really thoroughly with sawdust and wood chips, so we always have mulch real close by. It's a neat pattern. You might want to consider it. Just dumping wood chips, sawdust, leaves, lawn clippings in your walkways, and then you can always scrape up a little bit of mulch when you need it. And I do encourage all of you, wherever you are, warm states, cold states, whatever you're planting in the garden, give it a thorough mulch. I can feel that the soil is very, very moist right now. The mulch is moist, and the plants have just been hydrated. So I'm not too concerned about watering them in. But if you feel any dryness whatsoever in your soil, give it a thorough watering. Get the mulch on there and put a tag so you know what's there, what to expect in the spring. It's a lot longer than it needed to be. Basically, you dig them up, look for some shoots, get them back in the ground once they're hydrated, and you're off and running. But maybe you've got a Myoga patch that you want to expand. 2017 is when we started in the high tunnel. 2018, we tried it outside. Last year and this year we expanded like crazy. This is a plant you can ramp up an incredibly wonderful ground cover under trees and shrubs in your food forest context. Seems to be deer and rabbit proof. We're learning as we go, so share notes with us. Hopefully this was helpful. Let us know if you have any questions, and thanks for watching and for trying to grow awesome new plants.